Jesia Corbett's daily commute was a brutal 2-hour walk, a hardship she endured with quiet resilience. Little did she know, a chance encounter with a compassionate cop would ignite a viral story, transforming her struggle into a nationwide sensation, and leading to a gift she never dreamed possible. The biting wind whipped at Jesia Corbett's face, stinging her cheeks and making her eyes water. It was a brutal January morning in Nash County, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you question every decision that led you to be outside. Jesia, all of 19 years old, hunched her shoulders against the cold, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her. Her breath puffed out in white clouds as she hurried along the deserted shoulder of Highway 64, the asphalt slick with a treacherous sheen of frost. She was already late. Her destination, Bojangles. The bright yellow sign, promising crispy fried chicken and flaky buttermilk biscuits, felt miles away. Each step was a battle against the wind, against the ache in her legs, against the gnawing feeling of despair that threatened to overwhelm her. "Just keep going, Jesia," she told herself, her voice a whispered prayer against the roar of the wind. Just keep going. She pictured her grandmother, Mama Ruth, frail and dependent, waiting for her at home. That image, that responsibility, was the fuel that kept her moving. Suddenly, twin beams of light cut through the pre-dawn gloom, momentarily blinding her. A Nash County sheriff's cruiser slowed, its red and blue lights flashing a silent warning in the darkness. Jesia's heart pounded. She'd seen the cruisers patrol this stretch of highway before, but they rarely stopped. She braced herself, a flicker of fear mixing with the cold. The cruiser pulled alongside her, the window rolling down. Sergeant Scott Bass leaned over, his face etched with concern. He was a familiar sight to Jesia, a man who seemed to embody the quiet strength of the county itself. He'd spent years navigating these long, lonely stretches of road, both on his way to work and on patrol. He knew the rhythm of the county, the hardships, the quiet resilience of its people. And he'd seen this young woman walking this same route day after day. "Morning," Bass said, his voice a low rumble. "You all right out here?" Jesia managed a shaky smile. "Yes, sir. Just going to work." "Bojangles?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded, her cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and cold. Bass frowned. He'd noticed her before, this determined young woman in the Bojangles uniform, walking this same stretch of highway in all kinds of weather. Something about her unwavering spirit, her quiet perseverance, had tugged at him. This morning, seeing her shivering in the bitter cold, it was more than a tug. It was a sharp, insistent pull at his conscience. The encounters became a routine. Bass would often find Jesia on his morning patrol, offering her a ride when the weather was particularly harsh. He learned her name, Jesia Corbett. He learned that she lived with her grandmother, Ruth, in a small, dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. He learned that the walk to Bojangles was a grueling 2 hours each way, a testament to her unwavering commitment to her job and her family. "No car?" he'd asked one morning, trying to keep his voice casual. Jesia shook her head. "No, sir. Can't afford one. And there's no bus that comes out this way that early." Bass had been a deputy for over 15 years. He'd seen poverty, he'd seen hardship, but there was something about Jesia's situation, her quiet dignity in the face of adversity, that struck a chord. He thought about his own daughter, safely tucked away in her warm bed, and a wave of guilt washed over him. That evening, over dinner, Bass shared Jesia's story with his wife, Sarah. Sarah, a kind-hearted woman with a deep well of empathy, listened intently. She saw the worry etched on her husband's face, the genuine concern in his eyes. "It just doesn't seem right, Sarah," Bass said, pushing his food around his plate. "That girl walking all that way, in the cold, the heat, it's dangerous." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "What can we do, Scott?" The question hung in the air. They couldn't solve all the problems of Nash County, but maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference in one person's life. A particularly brutal day arrived. Jesia woke up feeling feverish and weak, her body aching. But Mama Ruth needed her medication, and the bills wouldn't pay themselves. She bundled up as best she could and started the long walk. Halfway to Bojangles, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She stumbled, nearly falling into the ditch. It was Base who found her, slumped against a utility pole, her face pale and drawn. He helped her into the cruiser, his concern deepening with each passing moment. "Jesia, you shouldn't be out here like this," he said gently. "You're sick." "I have to work, Sergeant," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I have to." That was the breaking point for Base. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the unwavering determination that was slowly being chipped away by circumstance. He knew he couldn't stand by and watch. He wrestled with his conscience. Was it appropriate for a law enforcement officer to get so personally involved? Would his actions be misinterpreted? But the image of Jesia struggling against the elements, against the weight of her responsibilities, kept flashing in his mind. The decision was made. He and Sarah would buy Jesia a bicycle. It wouldn't solve all her problems, but it would be a start. They found a sturdy, sky blue women's cruiser at a local bike shop, complete with a basket for carrying groceries or her work uniform. The next morning, Base waited for Jesia at her usual spot. He parked the cruiser a little further down the road, the blue bicycle gleaming in the back of his truck. When he saw her, he pulled over, a nervous smile on his face. Jesia looked at him, confused. "Sergeant." Base got out of the truck and walked to the back, his heart pounding. He pulled out the bicycle, presenting it to her like a knight offering a precious gift. "This is for you, Jesia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Jesia stared at the bicycle, her eyes widening in disbelief. She looked at Base, then back at the bicycle, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. I don't know what to say," she finally stammered, her voice choked with emotion. "You don't have to say anything," Base said, smiling. "Just be careful out there." The gratitude that flooded Jesia was overwhelming. She reached out and touched the handlebars, her fingers tracing the smooth curves of the frame. It was more than just a bicycle. It was a symbol of hope, a lifeline in a sea of hardship. Life changed for Jesia. The ride to Bojangles was now a breeze, a pleasant journey instead of an arduous trek. She had more time to spend with Mama Ruth, more energy for her work. Her colleagues at Bojangles noticed the difference. She smiled more, laughed more. The customers noticed too, commenting on her cheerful demeanor. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One afternoon, as Jesia was locking up her bicycle after her shift, she heard a sickening crunch. She turned to see a group of teenagers speeding away in a pickup truck, her blue bicycle a mangled mess under its wheels. Whether it was intentional or a cruel accident, she didn't know. But the result was the same. Her lifeline was gone. The despair that washed over her was almost unbearable. She walked home that night, the 2 hours feeling longer and harder than ever before. The image of the crushed bicycle, a symbol of her shattered hopes, haunted her. Base found her the next morning, walking the same familiar route, her shoulders slumped, her spirit broken. He knew immediately what had happened. He felt a surge of anger, not just at the perpetrators, but at the unfairness of it all. "Jesia," he said softly, pulling alongside her. "I'm so sorry." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "It's okay, Sergeant," she said quietly. "It was just a bicycle." But it wasn't just a bicycle. It was a symbol of hope, a symbol of someone caring. And Base knew he had to do something more. He couldn't just fix the bicycle. He had to fix the situation. This time, he would find a solution that couldn't be so easily broken. He owed it to Jesia. He would take it to a level where it would be seen as not just an act between two people, but a movement. The story of Jesia and Sergeant Base didn't stay confined to the quiet roads of Nash County. A local newspaper reporter, intrigued by rumors of a cop's extraordinary kindness, interviewed them both. The resulting article, a heartfelt portrayal of Jesia's struggles and Base's compassion, was picked up by a larger news outlet. Then it went viral. Social media exploded with comments, shares, and messages of support. People were moved by Jesia's resilience and Base's selfless act. Donations poured in, small amounts from ordinary people touched by the story. The local community rallied around Jesia, offering support and encouragement. The wave of attention eventually reached the producers of the Steve Harvey Show. They were captivated by the story, seeing it as a perfect example of the human spirit's capacity for both hardship and kindness. They invited Jesia and Sergeant Bass to appear on the show. Jesia, overwhelmed and a little terrified, initially hesitated. She'd never been on television, never even been outside of North Carolina. But Mama Ruth, her eyes shining with pride, urged her to go. "This is your chance, child," she said. "Your chance to show the world what you're made of." The day of the show was a whirlwind. Jesia was whisked through hair and makeup, dressed in a new outfit, and ushered onto the brightly lit stage. The audience roared with applause as she walked out, hand in hand with Sergeant Bass. Steve Harvey, known for his booming voice and even bigger heart, greeted them warmly. He listened intently as Jesia, her voice trembling slightly at first, recounted her story. She spoke of the long walks, the cold, the fear, but also of the unwavering support of her grandmother and the unexpected kindness of a police officer. The audience was captivated. Tears streamed down faces, and even Harvey himself seemed deeply moved. Bass, standing beside Jesia, felt a surge of pride. He'd never sought recognition, but seeing Jesia shine, seeing her story resonate with so many people, filled him with a profound sense of satisfaction. Then came the moment that would change Jesia's life forever. Harvey, with his characteristic flair for the dramatic, announced that the show, along with a generous sponsor, was giving Jesia $5,000. The audience gasped, and Jesia's eyes widened in disbelief. But that wasn't all. Harvey, with a mischievous grin, pointed to a large screen behind them. A video played, showing a shiny, brand-new Ford Fiesta gleaming under the studio lights. "And that, Jesia," Harvey boomed, "is yours." The audience erupted in cheers. Jesia burst into tears, overwhelmed by the sheer generosity and the magnitude of the moment. She hugged Harvey, then turned to Bass, her face radiant with joy and gratitude. Bass, his own eyes glistening, gave her a warm hug. He knew this was more than just a car. It was a key to a new life, a life free from the constant struggle of the long walk. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the power of community, the power of a story that had touched the hearts of millions. The Ford Fiesta, a vibrant shade of blue, a subtle nod to the bicycle, became Jesia's chariot. She drove it to Bojangles, the engine purring with a smooth confidence that mirrored her own newfound sense of freedom. She parked it proudly in the lot, a visible symbol of her journey, her triumph over adversity. No longer did she have to brave the elements on foot. She could now drive Mama Ruth to her doctor's appointments, pick up groceries without worrying about carrying them for miles, and even explore the world beyond Nash County. She enrolled in night classes at the local community college, pursuing a degree in nursing, inspired by the care her grandmother had received. Jesia never forgot the kindness of Sergeant Bass. He became a regular visitor at her and Mama Ruth's home, sharing meals and stories. He was more than just a benefactor. He was a friend, a mentor, a part of their extended family. Bass, in turn, was profoundly changed by the experience. He continued his work as a deputy, but his perspective had shifted. He saw his role not just as an enforcer of the law, but as a servant of the community, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt dark and uncaring. He became more proactive, seeking out opportunities to help those in need, inspired by Jesia's resilience and the overwhelming response to their story.